about my mentor, whose name was Reg Revans, and he became very famous in England for being a management person. He invented a system called action learning, and that system was very much like knowledge management. In fact, we might think it was the first to knowledge management, because he said if you could bring managers together and they could talk with each other, they could learn a great deal from each other. So he set up this system called action learning where these managers could learn from each other. I asked him one time where the idea of action learning had come from. And he said he got the first idea about it when he was a doctoral student at Cambridge. There was a laboratory there and he was studying nuclear physics. He was a doctoral student. And at that laboratory, which was a place where they were trying to split the atom, so it was at the very beginning of nuclear physics. At that laboratory, there were 5 Nobel Prize winners, including the person that Reg Revans was the student for, and that was Rutherford, who eventually did split the atom. So the interesting thing that he learned when he was there was that every Wednesday afternoon they would have tea, like the English often do in the afternoon. And he said that at this tea in the afternoon, on every Wednesday afternoon, that the physicists came, the Nobel Prize winners, but also some of their doctoral students. Only the very best students could come to this afternoon tea. And there was one rule of the afternoon tea, and that was that these Nobel Prize winners could not talk about a success, not talk about something that they had just discovered. The only thing they were allowed to talk about was some problem they were having difficulty solving. So each time one would start saying, I've tried this, I've tried that, I've tried something else, I still can't get it solved, and others, the other Nobel Prize winners would talk about their ideas they had that might help. And out of that, out of these discussions, which were very important discussions, they could think again of the next thing to try to do. So Revans left the Cavendish Lab at Cambridge when he began to be concerned about what was going to happen with nuclear physics. And military organizations began to talk about how they might use these nuclear ideas. And at that point, he said he didn't want any more to do with it. He left, and he turned his attention to business. And he began to take this idea that he'd learned in the Cavendish, particularly the idea of humility, that if we're going to learn, we have to be humble. And he began to bring together managers to help them learn from each other. And he devised a process to do that, the process he called action learning. And he became very well known for this process, and the process spread throughout England and much of Europe. And about that time, the University of Manchester was starting a business school. So they invited Reg Revans, because he had a very good reputation now, to be one of the professors at that university. But the ideas he was talking about, which were that people could learn from each other, they did not need an expert to tell them or give them an answer, was very much against the ideas that were in the university at that time, because that was the beginning of scientific management. And the ideas that the other professors were writing about were about experts telling you how to do your own kind of work. So the more Reg Revans talked, the more the other professors disliked the ideas he was presenting. So finally it got so bad at the university, he got so frustrated with all of these people telling him that he was wrong. The other professors were saying, if these managers can't solve their own problems, how will bringing them together solve their problems? We're just adding ignorance together. And they thought the whole idea was very ridiculous. So they finally were so unkind to him that he said, I'm leaving the university. And he had at that time an invitation from the King of Belgium, who was very interested in growing the economy of Belgium. And the king had heard about Reg Revans' work, and he asked if Reg could come to Belgium and start working with the different industries in Belgium. And he did that over a period of 9 years. And at the end of that time, got an award from the King of Belgium, saying that Reg had improved the economy through the action learning process he had put into place. So I learned about Reg Revans and his work in the middle of the 1980s. And I was at that time very much thinking that training was not doing all the learning we needed in organizations. I was discouraged about training as the way to help an organization learn. And I liked this idea that Reg Revans had, so I went and studied with him for 3 years and learned all the stories and learned how he did action learning. And then I began to, then as knowledge management began to come on, I could see that those lessons that he had around how people learn from each other, how peers can connect and really learn, were exactly right for knowledge management. So I began to write about those ideas.